ब्रह्मरूपमादिमध्यशेषसर्वभासकम् भावषट्कहीनरूपनित्यसत्यमद्वयम् वाङ्मनोतिगोचरञ्च नेति नेति भावितम् तं नमामि देवदेव रामकृष्णमीश्वरम्. Namaste to all of you, and I wish you all a very happy Ganesh Chaturthi Day. Ganesha, as most of us know, happens to be the presiding deity of intellect, buddhi. And he is also considered to be Vignaharana, who helps us to get rid of our problems. Actually, whenever we are discussing Yoga Vasishta, we should also add one word: the so-called problems. And why they are called as so-called problems? But they just melt away, they dissolve once the intellect becomes active. That is why he is called as the presiding deity of intellect. We have been discussing Yoga Vasishta in not really detail, but we are talking the essence of the portions of Yoga Vasishta. It's always better to recall the doubt of Rama. Rama says, what is it that makes us all the time go after the objects of senses? Be influenced by our mind, which consists of desires, thoughts, emotions, feelings, dreams and nightmares. Why is it that we are carried away by these mind stuff, this mind stuff? And amidst this temporal world, amidst this changing world, is there anything permanent? For which Vasishta, to explain the qualities of this wandering of the mind, the troubles of the mind, he says, why it is happening is, the first suggestion which he says is that we are searching for permanence outside. Now that outside has different layers of understanding. Outside not only means that which is outside the body. It consists of the body, the mind, and the ego. So he says, we are actually looking for something permanent, which is in the temporal world. That's how the whole scripture begins. Let me give you an example. Many of us, we prepare tea. We put the water on the stove, gas, keep it on that. And let us say that it's cold water. It is always cold water. If you just carefully observe the water, initially the heating up starts with one small bubble, very small bubble. And then later on, the number of bubbles increase, and as they rise, the water starts boiling. Something like that happens in our mind or to our mind. The first bubble happens to be the I, the feeling of I, which is behind all our activity, behind all our feelings, behind all our experience. I see, I hear, I talk, I listen. I think, I am sad, I am elated, I am happy, I am miserable. That I is the first bubble, if I may say so. So the details of this bubble, the details of this I have been described in the first section called as the Utpatti Prakarana. The initial two we have already discussed sufficiently. The Vairagya, when Rama expresses his doubts, the Mumukshu Prakarana, Mumukshu Vyavahara Prakarana, how a seeker should behave, what are his activities, what should be his activities, how he should have, what should be his attitude. These were discussed. And we have caught hold of those four pillars of Shama, sweet patience, Vichara, Santosha, and Sadhu Sangha. These we'll keep on repeating whenever it's necessary. The Utpatti Prakarana was described by Vasishta, and that example is very handy here to understand. When it starts boiling, the water starts boiling, when the mind becomes extremely active, it's always better to nip it in the bud, remove it from the gas, then the water will cool down again. Something like that. That is, remove it from the ajnana. That's what he says, Vasishta says. Then you'll cool down and you'll get back to your state. But that's not possible for most of us, not almost all of us. So what should we do? We allow this I to grow to the peak, and then it will come down. There is a very beautiful series of books which are written by one anthropologist whose name is Carlos Castaneda. We are not going into the details of that, but his master, one Don Juan, he takes him to a very picturesque place, a forest really, and it's night. He says, I'm going to leave you alone here. You be here. There is a little panic in the mind of this Carlos. He says, don't worry. I want you to observe something. I want you to listen to something. He waits for some time, Don Juan, and then whispers something in the ear of this Carlos. It's very, dramatic. Don Juan says, are you able to listen to the insects making so much of noise? Carlos says, yes, I'm able to hear to it. Can you distinguish one from the other? He tries for some time, and then he says, it's difficult. In fact, in all over our country, we have heard this, we have listened to this, especially if it's night and if it's rainy season, just as it's going on now. You can hear the frogs, you can hear the crickets. In Rajasthan, we used to always hear crickets making that chirping sound. He says, I'm unable to distinguish one from the other, but collectively I'm able to listen to them. Then he again whispers into his ear. He says, wait for a moment, wait for that moment when every creature, every insect stops making that noise. And believe me, this person who is very sincere, he waits for hours and hours. And after nearly 2 or 2.5 hours, suddenly there is silence. And at that moment, he is able to hear his mind speaking, hear his heart beating. So what was that? He was totally receptive earlier to the outside sound. And then he started becoming aware. When that silence dawned outside, he was able to listen to his own noise, which he's making. Carlos Castaneda said, it was also a noise. And then I realized, he says, that noise was much louder than the insects. That's what is happening to us. Why is it that we are not able to listen to silence? Why is it that we are unable to, many of us, we listen to something, maybe a song, a music. If it's classical music, it goes on for hours together. Say maybe 1.5 hours, a raga goes on. So most of us listen to that music for about 5 minutes. Then after 5 minutes, we start wandering away. We are away from that music. we are away from what we are trying to listen. So this particular section of Yoga Vasishta, which is called as Upashanti Prakarana, Upashama Prakarana, it is the quietening of ego, quietening of that I notion. How it is done, what is to be done, all these details are given by this episode, which I personally feel is one of the most important sections of this scripture. Vasishta, Yoga Vasishta, Muni Vasishta starts with this prakarana as such. He introduces the prakarana as such. He says, two gunas, he introduces gunas. What are known as gunas? I'm not giving you the technical aspect of it. What are they responsible for? Vasishta Muni says, Rajoguna is the one which drives us, which takes us towards helpless and involuntary activity. We are obsessed by activity that is done by this Rajoguna. And the second one, he says, is Tamoguna, Tamas. Tamas is that one which takes us towards darkness, towards inactivity, towards inertia. So apparently, we are aware of only two things that are happening. One is wandering of the mind. The other one is when you try to stop that wandering mind, we go to sleep. We start dozing. Most of us have children and we have observed children. See, you ask a child to sit quietly for some time. Initially, it feels very restless, especially if you ask him to hold the arms like that and sit. Most of the children will not obey you at all. But some of them who obey, initially they'll keep quiet, but they are very restless because they are uncomfortable. And then immediately, after some time, they start dozing and go to sleep. So this childhood observation is relevant to even us. When we try to meditate, when we try to focus somewhere, when we stop the wandering mind, we go to inertia, we go to sleep, we go to ignorance. The masters that our sages were, and they had observed the existence in a very, very detailed manner. Very carefully they had observed nature. And they said, there is one more guna which is responsible for balancing both of them. Balancing the activity, balancing the rest. We are not obsessed with rest. We are not obsessed with activity also. If it's necessary, sattva will help us be active. And at the same time, it is calm. There's no disturbance as such. Have you noted that the word bhranti, which means madness, it has come from the word brahmana. Brahmana means wandering. When the mind starts wandering, then we tend towards bhranti, madness. In one of the lectures, Acharya Rajneesh, Osho Rajneesh, he gives a very beautiful suggestions to his disciples. He says, most of you have recorders. This probably he had given it long time back when these video recordings were not there. He says, you have these tape recorders. You keep it on, sit inside a room. If necessary, you bolt that room and start speaking out loudly the thoughts which are coming into your mind. For 10 minutes, 15 minutes, close that, stop that recording and then rewind it and listen to it. you will find that there is absolutely no difference between a madman who talks loudly his thoughts and you. And that is because he gives that very beautiful word, Brahmanam. Because of this wandering, this happens. And uh, Sudhakarji asked me the doubt. He said that why is it that we have these swinging moods? The swinging moods are there because there is too much of Brahmanam, or we are trying to control it forcefully. When there is too much of force, then there are swinging moods because the mind does not want to rest. The mind does not want to calm down because apparently for mind is afraid that it will die. Because the statements which you see in Yoga Vasishta, they say, what is to be done? You quieten the mind. You stop the mind. And if you stop the mind, that is, or you transcend the mind. When you transcend the mind, when you stop the mind, what happens to the mind as such? It dies. So it's afraid to die. And that is why they are all tricks played by the mind to stop you from persistingly trying to stop the mind, to calm down the mind. So Upashama Prakarana says, he starts with Rajoguna and Tamoguna. These two are responsible for not only the swinging moods, not only the desires, not only the thoughts and concerns and worries and dreams, all which take us away from our real nature, and real nature is of that of happiness because of these two gunas. So here he has interpreted the Ashubhavasanas, which we had discussed long time back. Ashubhavasanas, which are responsible, the state which we are in. To tackle these Ashubhavasanas with Shubhavasanas. And Shubhavasanas are Sattvic Vasanas, which are dominated by Sattva. For that, again, those four pillars, remember, Vichara, Santosha, contentment, and finally, through the grace, the Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu Sangha, if you are very, very fortunate, you'll be able to meet an enlightened person. If not, we have thousands of scriptures. You go to any scripture, any book which talks about spirituality or anything that gives you a solace, that gives you a hope, Sadhu Sangha. And these will help us to get ourselves the nature of Sattva, or to become predominantly Sattvic, then things will be all right. Things will be able to cool down. Now, some of us may say that, is it possible that way? For that, he gives a very beautiful story, which it's one of the principal stories in this Upashama Prakarana. Story of King Janaka. King Janaka was pacing in the royal garden, and he was very calm. His mind was very pleasant. It was peaceful. Suddenly he heard some voices. The voices were of those Siddhas. Vasishta Muni says, he heard the songs of Siddha. The first Siddha said, get rid of the wandering of the mind. How? Try to detach yourself from the sense objects. If you detach yourself from the sense objects, then you will be able to detach yourself from the mind. And then you'll be able to meditate. That was the first suggestion. The second Siddha said, we are too identified with what we are seeing, what we are perceiving. Or rather, we have these five senses. We have the object of senses. For instance, now the object of sense is the sound which is coming, the sight which we see. He says, too much of identification by the seer, by the perceiver, by the person who senses those sense objects with the objects. Try to remove this, then your mind will become calm. The third one says, we are all searching for the stones and pebbles outside, forgetting that we have a gem within. Try to seek that gem within. Look inward. Don't look outside, look inward. Then you'll learn. And there are so many, there are nearly some 5, 6, 10, nearly 10 songs which are sung, the single sentences which are uttered by the Siddhas. The scripture describes, at that time, Janaka became like a peacock waiting for the rain. When he was hearing these songs of Siddhas, he became like a peacock who was waiting for rain, ready to spread his, feathers. And then suddenly, something happened to him. And then he dived within. What happened? He came to a position of vichara, contemplation. He said that, what am I doing? I'm squandering away this energy which is given to me, the time which is given to me, in unnecessary and impermanent things. Second thought he gets, the things are not impermanent. I, who have very small life compared to eternity, compared to the ultimate reality which is eternal, which is always there, which is ever there. My existence is not even a moment, single moment. He again thinks further. Compared to the infinite ultimate reality, the position of Earth, this will be agreed by the present astronomers. The Earth is like a speck of dust. What am I? I'm insignificant. I'm not there. Why do I nurture this ego? What have I got to do with this ego? Which is nothing, which is just a shadow. And then he got enlightened. Now, Muni Vasishta is talking about an adhikari, a person who has the patrata, who has the eligibility, who is ready. And that's why small suggestions which were given by these Siddhas, they went home. They went directly home and he became enlightened. Many times it so happened when you talk about this, then the words don't come out. Janaka got enlightened. You might say that it's all right for Janaka, but what about us? Let me assure you, let me tell you that every one of us, some time or the other, some event, somebody telling something, a shock, it may be an accident, something like that. It may be death. It may be a small sentence in a magazine. It makes us think. We are somehow, it's like a, you would have heard of rabbits. When they see a spotlight on them, they are stunned. We get stunned for a moment, and then a question slowly is asked. The mind starts asking. The inner voice starts asking, what am I doing? The moment this question comes, it means you are extremely receptive. It's a different matter whether we pursue that thought and we continue that thought so that we become the adventurers of this consciousness. That's a different matter. But then every one of us, at every time, somewhere or the other, one or two suggestions come and then we listen to it. We are receptive to it. But unfortunately, this wandering mind doesn't allow us to stay there for a moment. to think about it. Vasishtha is telling again, this thing happens. We're going back to that. This thing happens because of Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Ashubhavasanas. Take hold of the Ashubhavasanas and slowly and steadily remove these Ashubhavasanas. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell a wonderful story about, which is relevant here, that's why I'm telling this, about a person. He was a pilgrim. Actually, he was a wayfarer. He was walking from one town to the other. And it is said it was night. And he was continuing to walk. And then he saw a strange sight. He saw in a small plain, which was a small area, one tantric was practicing. He had he had decorated the whole place with rangoli. He had also acquired a corpse, a dead body, on which it is said that these tantrics sit on that and then do meditation. Must be very fearful. But then that was what he was doing. He was worshipping the place. He started worshipping the corpse. He put the flowers. When suddenly the wayfarer who was waiting under a tree heard a tiger's growl. It was a roar of a tiger. Scared that he was, the pilgrim, he climbed the tree, and involved that he was, this tantric, he did not hear the tiger coming, and it is said that tiger snatched him away and he became the meal of the tiger. After some time, everything was quiet. He climbed down the tree, this wayfarer, and just out of curiosity, he didn't have anything in mind, just out of curiosity, this person said that these tantrics worship, because it was known to people that tantric sadhana is like that. Let me see how it happens. And then he went and sat on the corpse, the dead body. Immediately it is said, he had the darshan of Mother Kali. Now, this pilgrim was flabbergasted. He was shocked. He said, I do not know anything about Tantra. I am not a sadhaka. I was just going from one town to the other, and I happened to see this yogi, this tantric, doing something. And then he became a person who had spent so much of time, so much of his energy in preparing this ground for meditation. He became a meal for the tiger. And I, who am nothing, nobody, you have graced me with your darshan. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells, Mother Kali said, my child, you are ready. He still has some more time. You're just ready. And that's how you got the darshan. Ramakrishna is giving a very great hint here. He says, spirituality, enlightenment, the ultimate goal of spirituality, if I may say so, is it doesn't have any rules and regulations. It can happen to anybody, and it can happen to anyone in any state, whatever maybe he's doing. Janaka, King Janaka, he became enlightened, but he didn't go to the forest. He's supposed to be the king, the Rajarshi, who continued to rule in that enlightened state. One of the stories which we had read or which we had discussed was the story which is told to Rama by Vishwamitra. Vasishtha to Rama. He talks the story of the Shuka, that is son of Vyasa, who goes to Janaka for enlightenment. So you see that whether he's the same Janaka or different Janaka, that's not the point. But everywhere, King Janaka has been depicted as a person who is an adhikari. That is what the scripture is trying to tell. For an adhikari, who is ripe. And Sri Ramakrishna used to call this as Pakka Ami and Kacha Ami. Pakka Ami is Pakwa Ahankara. That Ahankara which seeks its own origin. And Kacha Ami, that is Kacha Ahankara, is that which takes us outside, which takes us towards Bhranti through Brahmanam. So if this is understood, this part is understood, then probably most of us will not be much bothered about how long it is going to take, when will it happen. The present age, it's always goal oriented. It always seeks. Suppose I practice for 7 years. Suppose I practice for 70 years. Will I get enlightened? Nobody knows. Probably a person who has worked for only 1 or 2 years, he gets enlightened. And persons like Ramana Maharshi, it was only a moment that they got enlightened. They got so enlightened that it is said that Ramana Maharshi never came down from that plane. 2 days back, we were listening to Swami Sarvapriyananji of Vedanta Society, New York. It was a very beautiful lecture on seeing God everywhere. I'm not discussing that, but he talked about Ramana Maharshi, which was liked by all us when we were listening to it. It is said that Ramana Maharshi was sent a letter by somebody, one of his critics. Pointing out so many, limitations in his thought, in his sadhana, in his enlightenment, and all that. It's always easy to criticize somebody. He had sent a letter. So the disciples had also gone through that letter. And Ramana Maharshi, he asked that somebody to bring that letter, and then he was correcting. There were spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes. And then he said, you send it back. So the disciples asked him, Maharshi, this letter was meant for you. This person is telling that you have all these limitations. He says, I do not know. He is talking about some Ramana who has these limitations. But I thought that there was some language problem, and then I corrected it and sent it back. To this extent, a person can go to that level when he is totally unidentified with his body, mind, and ego, and he's in that state. So this is an ideal state, but we have a lot of pointers here. Let me conclude with one small episode which happened in 2 Sufi saints. One Muhammad Salih was an enlightened master. And in a small town, he used to practice, he used to teach his disciples. And one of the oft repeated sentences or instructions to the disciples was, you keep knocking at the door of reality. You continue to knock at the door of reality, and it will open for you. And Rabia al-Adabiya, whom we had talked last time, she was an enlightened lady, Sufi master. She was passing through. She heard it, she waited for some time. She went near the place where he was teaching. He said, I did not know that the door to reality is locked. It is always open. There is nothing to knock. And this small parable, usually these parables tell you so much in a few sentences. It is said that there is no answer. Only this was a comment given by Rabia al-Adabiya. And apparently, if you are careless, we feel that Salih was wrong because he was asking his disciples to continuously knock at the door. And Rubia was right. Actually, it has a deeper aspect. You see, Salih was not an ordinary person. He was an enlightened master, and he helped a lot of people to get enlightened. So it belongs to the two categories of persons. Rabia was talking about Janakas, the tantric, Raman Maharshi, for people like him. And Sali was talking about people like us, the so-called ordinary people. So-called because we are not ordinary, we are extraordinary. But only thing is, we have forgotten that we are extraordinary. And this extraordinariness, which is our inheritance, which is our nature, can be found in this ordinary world, in these ordinary transactions which we are doing. Only thing is, we have to be little careful. But this being careful comes only when the mind is silent, when the ego has stopped all its mischief, when we have become receptive. Every enlightened person, every rishi, he keeps telling, after his enlightenment, he says, I didn't know this is my natural state. I was unnecessarily wandering. I went on wandering until I found that it's with me only. There are so many statements like this. Somebody asked Buddha, he said that, what did you achieve when you got nirvana? He says, I lost my ignorance. I do not know what I achieved because I realized that nirvana is a natural statement for me. And he made one more wonderful statement. He said, I see everywhere this Buddhatva, this enlightenment. In stone, this enlightenment is asleep. In vegetations, in trees and crops and small bushes, shrubs, it has become alive. It has started moving a little bit, but it's not moving per se. It's stationary in some place. In animals and birds and insects and all that, they have become alive. They have started moving. And all of you are unaware of this enlightenment, which is your natural state. Somebody asked Buddha, what is the first thing that you did after your enlightenment? Buddha remembered, and there were tears of gratefulness in his eyes. He said, I turned in a particular direction and bowed low. I did Sashtanga Pranipatasana. I fell on the ground in gratitude because I had been told some 2005 years back by one Amitabha Buddha that you too are going to become a Buddha in your later lives. He had reminded me, he had told me that I'll get enlightened. And similarly, I'm reminding you that Buddhatva is your very nature. You may take time. You may have to do sadhana. And the beauty is, all this so-called sadhana, all this so-called effort, because everybody says that it's very, very difficult. It's, you have to have a lot of courage to plunge into this sadhana and things like that. Basically, it is to make us effortless. We are so stressed. These days, the sicknesses which are upon us are called as lifestyle diseases because we are stressed. Why? All our problems are weighing heavily on us, and we are unnecessarily keeping those problems on our head and then crying loud, crying hoarse that we are troubled, we have problems. And problems are there when you become simple, when you become receptive, when you are ready to receive the enlightenment, which is always there. You would have heard of a statement which says that it is supposed to be made by God or reality. You take one step towards me, I'll take 10 towards you. Somewhere, one of the poets, he says that just as I'm searching for you, I know, oh God, you too are searching for me. But unfortunately, I'm unable to find. But I'm searching for you. So it's better that instead of taking those 10 steps, you take hundreds so that you come to me very fast. That's an appeal by a bhakta, by a devotee. But all this so-called struggle, so-called adventure is full of joy if but we are able to understand that the path is very, 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 individual. Each one of us has a path which is meant for me, and that path is to be discovered by us. Only these scriptures can give you guidance. Not only broad guidelines, but also even specific guidelines are given by the scriptures. But to implement that, first of all, we have to make a decision. We have to take a decision that I want it desperately. I want this to happen. And when that happens, it's like, a realization that it was always there. It is like a room, which Sri Ramakrishna tells, which was closed for hundreds of years, thousands of years. When you go into that room and light a candle, light a lamp, what happens? Enlightenment, does it happen moment by moment or suddenly? Invariably, enlightenment happens suddenly. But that sudden moment will only come when we are prepared. And all this sadhana is meant for us to prepare ourselves for this great event that will help us to see God in each and every transaction which we make. It's there. It's there, very much there. And only thing is, we, in our own obsessions, in our own preoccupations, in our own priorities that we keep, we have forgotten. So slowly and steadily, start learning how to keep these priorities aside and make that as a very high priority in your life. Swami Chinmayanji used to say that when we are born or when we become ambitious in our youth, we make a long list of items to buy from this life. He says, in that, God or self-realization happens to be last. They say that it's meant for old people. When you retire, especially when you are about over 65, 70, and if you start having these knee problems and arthritic problems when you're not able to walk, then you can sit and then start doing meditation. It never happens that way. Unless and until you train your body, mind for that, even when you are youth. And it doesn't matter if it has not come to you in your youth. If it has started now is the time. Just as Janaka decided that now is the time. I have wasted enough time. I have wasted enough of my energy. Let me do it for myself and start being really selfish for a while. For a while, why? Because we have responsibilities. That for a while means maybe for 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening. Make it a routine. Start sitting quietly for some time. Doesn't matter if the mind wanders, let it wander. But slowly and steadily, your habit of sitting will help you to achieve the way which has risen now through all our activities, all our responsibilities, all our effort in survival. The wave has waved it to its peak. It has to come down. Only thing is, don't wait for it to come down on its own. You start helping that wave to become calm. And well, that's what I had to say. Thank you so much.
Jaya, anything to ask? Or anybody can ask any questions if you have. one thought that comes to my mind is we have so many mistakes, just like Raghuji for this thing. Why they don't get this sort of recognition? Ramana or Sri Ramakrishna or Tatapuri. Is it because this mysticism? We have lots of this Sufi mysticism is more highlighted than the mysticism of the sages or the seers.
Probably the time has come, it has already come, when our culture as such is being studied by people abroad. The youngsters these days are getting interested in finding out something for their, maybe for their solace, maybe they want a change, maybe they have started asking questions. So it's not that these sages were not known, they are not known to people, but only thing is probably, as you rightly pointed out, they are being talked about very, very much. The books have come, and if I may say so, you see, our pundits have a lot of contribution to make in this direction. You say language was, our language was, all these scriptures have come in the language of Sanskrit. Now, see, I'll tell you one of my experiences. Way back in, if I'm not mistaken, it was in 74, 75, when I had an occasion to go to Puri. So I went to Shankaracharya, there's a Puri, Shankar Mat is there. So I had gone there, and then it was somewhere in the forenoon, somewhere around 10:30 or something like that. I went and asked somebody, I said that I have so many doubts. Basically, I was a doubting Tom all the time. Some of my friends used to call me as a question mark, all the time asking questions and trying to seek the changing answers. So when I asked somebody that I want to meet the Swamiji, he asked me, why do you want to meet him? He says, I have certain doubts. He says, I don't think he'll be able to meet you, but anyway, I'll ask him. So Swamiji called me inside. At that time, he was, that was humorous, but he had so much that now that I think about it, he had given me a hint already. He said that he looked at me and then he was dictating a letter, a legal letter. See, there was a court case and then he was giving the legal. So he asked me, what do you want? He says, I have some doubts. Doubts? Regarding what? I have regarding mind and about death and things like that. Those questions which were filled in my mind. He says, don't you see that I'm in a very important business of a court case? I don't have time for this. And then he said, for that, you be ready and come later on. I mean, I forgot that. You see, all these days I had forgotten that you be ready and come back. It was like Ramakrishna, who used to have a lot of visitors. When they started asking about spirituality, he would say, do you see that today's, the decoration which is made to Mother Kali is so beautiful. You go and visit the temple, he would say. He would discourage, he will not discourage, he will distract them in sending them to the thing. This revered Swamiji had done the same thing to me, but I misunderstood, because that was my mind at that time. I chose to misunderstand and then felt that, you see, these people don't have time. Actually, they are meant to clear the doubts of the persons like me, because I consider my doubts as very, very important. I consider myself as very, very important person. So every day, these things are happening, but we fail to register them. Probably, as somebody I was telling, when this transcendental meditation was introduced in West, People had humorously, Swami Ranganathananji was telling, it's good that it is coming from West. The same thing happened in Swami Vivekananda's life, he would say. He said that Swamiji was not heard here, but when he spoke from that Western platform, people started listening to him and people started becoming receptive to Indian culture, he said. Let it take time. It doesn't make any difference whether we are popular or not, whether we are. But the truths are very, very clear and very, very simple. But unfortunately, the Sanskrit and the Pandits in between, they have created they have somehow created an impression that they are very difficult to understand. They are not so difficult. And well, these days there are so many books which talk about these scriptures. You take any book by any person, and especially if you take the books of Swami Vivekananda, which he has spoken on so many things, or maybe people like Ranganathananji, or maybe people like Chinmayananji, they brought these scriptures to the door of an ordinary person who is involved in day-to-day activity. So,
Thank you. That slavish mentality is very much there in us.
It's there. I think. What do you think now it's happening? Now also we are slaves. Somebody tells us that you do this, we are like cows, we are accepting it. I think that will remain unless and until I'm coming back to that. Unless we start becoming very actively involved in vichara, it will not happen. We are at the mental level, so we have fears, we have stability in mind, we want to be stable, we want to think things should go on as we want. So naturally we are not adventurous. But once we start thinking, once we start contemplating, once we start doing vichara as such, things will change. They have to change, because again it's a wave. Probably it's the wave of ignorance is at the peak. But I can assure you that wave of peak of enlightenment is rising. It's just a question of time. And let us help that wave to rise. But we'll not bother about the crowds as such. We'll bother, even if it's a small group. I think we are about some 20 people who are listening, 20 people who are involved in discussing. Let us start doing it in our own way. Let us do vichara. And then let's analyze what we are doing. Once that happens, things will happen. This way will rise. Don't worry about it.
Okay, any questions from anybody? They can unmute themselves and then ask.
Raghuji, as we have discussed in the beginning, normally if you will stop the mind, immediately the next step we will be moving towards nidra. So most of the time you can see, like instead of yoga nidra, it will be dhyana nidra. Most of us will fall down. So what we can do, because that is like the brain waves is what, or we will be moving. Why it is happening like that? Because normally while calming down, automatically mind will think like that, okay, we are going to sleep. Maybe. So what we can do, how we can come out of it?
Basically, I was telling you that individually we have to sort of discover our path in getting rid of it. When we are the mind is about to calm down, normally what happens is we go to sleep. So one way of approach is, when we are going to sleep, we are not meditating, mind you, we are going to sleep, start observing your mind. What happens? Actually, it's active. Especially, let me give you an example, which is a practical example nowadays. But we have to make a presentation tomorrow. Let's say that there is an online session and we have to make a presentation. What happens to us? We will not be able to sleep. Unable to sleep, because the mind is extremely active. But normal days, now this is not the time for you to do the observation because it's not possible. Normal days, let us say that we are going to sleep at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever be your time. We are about to go to sleep. Don't go back to bed immediately. Close your eyes, no doubt. But at the same time, start observing your mind. What is it doing? Invariably, you will find that initially there'll be a stream of thoughts. Probably one mosquito comes and then you hit it like that. Then immediately a stream of thought will be that when I was in some other place, there were huge mosquitoes, something like that. So it'll connect it with mosquitoes, go, and then it'll stop. When the mind as such starts slowing down, you go into sleep. Why? There is a natural survival habit in this. When there is too much of activity, every one of us, including the mind, needs rest. So the meditation sleep, as you rightly pointed out, is slightly different from the ordinary sleep. The meditation sleep is happening because the mind is starting to take rest. Doesn't matter. Don't bother about it. In fact, unfortunate habit of ours is when this happens, I slept off. It's not good. Don't do that. Yes, the mind wanted to rest, no problem. But invariably, in this sleep, the sleep which comes during meditation, it's not a long sleep as such. Remember the posture. We are sitting quietly. The head will go down like that, right? So when the head goes down, you wake up. You have to wake up. Because that's what happens. In fact, even children who are going to fall asleep, when they start dozing, they get up in between. We do get up. During that time, don't blame your mind. Don't, there's a paschatap chenda. Don't repent. Don't repent that you have gone to sleep. Right? The mind wanted rest. Oh, all right, no problem. Only thing is, you take care to see that you don't drop from the chair which you have fallen. that care you. But the body will not allow you to do that. You will wake up. Again, you do that. Repeatedly. That is Shanai Shanai, Shanai Shanai. You go on repeatedly doing that. A time will come. Mind will learn to rest even while it's alert. Now, the rest which is happening to the mind while doing meditation it is unconscious. Whereas the alertness will come and it has to come. Only thing is you require persistent, continual effort.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Okay, we will conclude with the Shanti Mantra. Jaya.
Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukha bhag bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.